I was actually sort of gearing towards the 2012 Paralympics as a swimmer, and I ended up having a surgery which went very wrong. So it was meant to be a simple overnight stay in the hospital. Ended up in being in the hospital for just over a year, having to have multiple surgeries. And, you know, what else can you do as a bedbound 16-year-old? You know, I began to do a lot of observing, observing what made a good doctor, what made a bad doctor, or not so good doctor. And I will never forget that there was this one doctor who came up to me, and she asked me a really simple question, and she just said, "Are you okay?" Which is really surprising because not many people ask you that question. And of course I told this doctor that I was really frightened and uncertain for my future, and she got up and she drew the curtains around the bed, and then she lifted up her top to show me a big scar across her abdomen, and she just said, "I know how you feel." And it was in that moment that she had taught me that, yes, I was going through this awful ordeal, but I was developing empathy, and empathy was something that I could use in the future to help other people. So yes, I don't have as much eyesight as most people, but I have more insight, and I think that is just as important when you are treating patients.
It must have been very daunting, though, to go into the medical profession, because you are a trailblazer. You are the UK's first deaf-blind doctor. So when you're looking around for a role model or somebody like you, there wasn't one. So it must be very daunting to be the first and to go into a degree which, let's face it, like most setups, most organisations, most education systems are geared towards able-bodied people. Absolutely. What was that like?
So I don't actually recall it ever occurring to me that I was the first deafblind to be doctor, especially at the beginning. I think obviously as I sort of began to share my journey along the way, people were like, "Oh, you must be the first." But I think at the beginning it was just a case of just trying to fit in. But obviously I knew that this was going to be different. It was going to be difficult. And at the very beginning I had to make sure that it was not only realistic but also safe, because that is the utmost priority. You know, are you safe enough to be a doctor?
And you were probably dealing with institutions that were asking that very same question at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. And unfortunately, that comes with tick boxes. And as a disabled person, you are never going to fit that perfect tick box of, you're just not, there's no, but actually there is no perfect image of being a doctor. So I did go through these sort of occupational health assessments, et cetera. But what was really, excuse the pun, eye-opening for me was a trip to the US, quite spur of the moment actually. I think it was my second year of medical school, where I went in search of blind and deaf doctors because I needed to know whether, what I was doing, is this doable?
Whether it would result in a job and a career.
Yeah, and
at the end of your studies and hard work.
Exactly. What are they doing differently to ensure that they can hold down this job? And I met 5 completely blind doctors and 1 completely deaf doctor, and actually the biggest thing that they taught me wasn't that they had necessarily better equipment or more money to help them do the job. It came down to the fact that they had colleagues who were more willing to sit down and say, "Okay, so I can see you've got this impairment, I can see that you're struggling with this, but what can we do differently to help you do your job, the same way as everybody else, and to fit in?" So, inclusion, open-mindedness, innovation, they were all things that made a huge difference.
Yeah, let's be clear, there are no shortcuts to becoming a doctor. You go through the same education, the same training, the same testing, the same evaluation as any able-bodied student.
Yeah.
But you know that there are those attitudes out there, even though you've proven people wrong. Yeah. You have qualified as a doctor, you are now a resident doctor. But you have taken to social media to dispel those myths, and you have, a couple of 100,000 followers across different platforms to talk about how it works. Because when you say to somebody, "I'm a deaf-blind doctor," the first question will be, how on earth does that work? Yeah. And you quite simply show them how.
Yeah. And I welcome those questions because, like I said, I fully anticipate that is going to be the first question. I mean, when I started, I didn't, like you said, I didn't have that role model. There were no other deaf-blind doctors out there, so I didn't know if it was doable. But I have found along the way that there are 2 different types of people. There are, it comes down to sort of innocent ignorance, so people that don't understand, but they are open to learning. and can change their mind and their perceptions of things. And then there's people that are ignorant, and no matter how much you try and educate them, they just don't know, because they don't want to know, because they have this set prejudice of what it means to be disabled, and they just don't want to accept that. But I'm so grateful that my misconception videos have reached many people, because I just hope that by being positive and advocating for better, it does teach people as to what you can do and what is possible, because you never know, there might be future generations of people, disability or not, that want to pursue something like medicine but don't know if they can. And so saying, oh, well, this is how I use a stethoscope as a deaf person, this is how I take blood as a blind person, hopefully it gives them a little bit of hope and direction.
Using a stethoscope as a deaf person is actually, thanks to the advances in technology and AI, which is coming into the NHS so much more, which, will help you along the way as much as you want it to and as much as it can. Can you just explain the stethoscope to us? Because again, that's one of your most popular videos.
It is.
Because that is the standard bit of Dr. Kit, right?
Yeah. I mean, actually, come to think of it, it's probably one of the only pieces of equipment that I use that's specialist. When it comes to the visual stuff, I don't really require other sort of additional things. But this stethoscope is like any other stethoscope, but it's just got a Bluetooth function to it, and my hearing aids are Bluetooth. So you just switch it on, flick on the hearing aids, and you place just this onto the patient's chest, and you can hear the heart and lung sounds without actually having to put anything in your ears, which is great for, and I always say, the little patients, the younger patients think, whoa, you've got super hearing, But it's great, because there have been a few instances where I have, thanks to having technology in my hands, I have picked up on heart murmurs better than my colleagues who have full hearing. So we cannot dismiss, the beauty and the possibilities with technology, and it just means that people like myself with disabilities, it just kind of helps to level things up and just helps us be able to do stuff.